Hey, just a heads up that the following content may be disturbing or triggering for some listeners and is not appropriate for children. Please take care of yourself and others who may be listening with you. Welcome to the Bonus Babies Podcast, a show that has no easy answers, only hard questions.
It's a team sport. I'm a team leader. I believe in what we call servant leadership. I think the job of a chairman or a leader is to lead and to enable other people to help a lot. And most tasks fall more rapidly, better, bigger, bolder when many hands are applied to make light work. So I'm privileged that I start by thinking, is this film or is this idea for a charity, is it big enough? Is this going to be appealing? When we've made it, how will it be sold? Why is it any good? Who will be thrilled by this? Who will experience empathy and feel a compassionate need to help this nonprofit?
Can you tell me what you call the kids who you've cared for over the years?
We feel that the children that we receive coming into our home are bonuses. So we call them bonus babies.
I love that. This is your host, Jayne Amelia Larson, and I'm a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate volunteer for youth in foster care. Yeah, I know it's a mouthful. In the same way a CASA works, I explore all things in the foster care maze by talking to kids, parents, caregivers, attorneys, social workers, therapists, really anybody and everybody who will speak to me to keep the conversation open and the information flowing about all things CASA. Recently, I met an extraordinary individual. I know, you're thinking, another extraordinary individual in this podcast, but yeah, he really is. Peter Samuelson is a filmmaker, a producer. He's an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur, he calls himself, and that's really true. And probably most importantly, he's a philanthropist. He believes that the meaning of life is service, and he's going to explain that to us right now. And Peter introduced me to the idea of the three levels of friendship as posited by Maimonides. The first is the utilitarian kind, like, I do this for you, you do this for me. The second is a deep friendship that often involves a love exchange of some kind. But the third and most important, the most lasting, the most profound, is the friendship with a higher purpose. This is the greatest friendship because there's purpose and meaning that goes way beyond a reciprocal exchange. It has the possibility of making the world a better place. I want to have that kind of friendship in my life, and I hope to have that kind of friendship with Peter Samuelson. Hi, I'm here with Peter Samuelson. Hi, Peter.
Hi, nice to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining me. So I want to talk about First Star and Foster Boy and all your philanthropic endeavors, but first I want to hear about you. Tell me who you are.
Who am I? Well, I'm many things. I am a British person who emigrated to the United States at the age of 24, and I've been here ever since. I'm a film producer. I'm a philanthropist. I'm a dad, and I'm a mountain bicyclist.
Wow, you got it all going on.
I got a lot going on, yeah. And I'm a guy surviving the COVID. How about that?
Yeah, that's fabulous. So, and you were the first in your family to go to college, right? To one of the best universities in the world, actually.
Well, I was the first in my family. I like to think I come from an intelligent family, but as has been very important to me in the work I've done in one of my philanthropies, realizing that people don't go to university if there's no one in their family who's ever been before. The epiphany for me was I had this English teacher called David Lund, and Mr. Lund said to me, see me after school, which is never a good thing if you're in high school. But I did see him after school, and he said, now look here, I think if you worked about twice as hard, you could go to a really good university. And I remember I laughed at him. And I said, Mr. Lund, no one in my family has ever been to university, not one, as far as I know. And he said, well, then, Samuelson, it'll be even better because you will be the first one. So epiphany number one was that Mr. Lund tutored me, mentored me, and I got myself into Cambridge. I got a bachelor's, I got a master's, and then I came out of Cambridge and realized that they were not standing in a line to employ people whose primary area of training was medieval English literature.
You mean like Beowulf and stuff like that?
Yeah, I do. And Gawain and the Green Knight and all the rest of it.
Uh-huh.
All very interesting, but not significantly interesting to any employer. And I had these Americans. I'd been earning, pocket money during my Cambridge years as an interpreter. And sometimes I worked for American studios, American producers when they worked in France or North Africa. And so I knew some of them. And eventually someone said to me, why don't you come back to America? And you can see how a film is edited. Wouldn't that be interesting? And I said, well, where's your office? And this man said, Hollywood and Vine in Los Angeles. And I said, goodness me, I think I've even heard of that. So,
Yes.
single man, no ties. I got on an airplane and I came, never really thinking that I was emigrating. I thought I was sort of on a visit. I'd stay 2-3 months and then I'd go home again. But at a certain point, you realize this is where my clothes are. This is where I seem to find work. This is where my friends now are. And at a later point, you look around and you say, I have a wife, I have a mortgage, I have children. I guess I live here. And so I went down, applied for citizenship, went down. They'd managed to get themselves a big backlog at the INS. So I went down with about 2,500 other would-be American citizens. We were all given a little stars and stripes on a stick and
A little baby flag,
a
huh?
little baby flag. They showed us, various videos of amber, fields of waving grain.
Amber waves of grain. Yeah.
Amber waves of grain.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we were sworn in. I had no idea how emotional it would be to become an American. I thought, the United Kingdom is not a bad place to be from. And yes, I'd prefer to live in the United States, but I thought it was pretty much even Stevens. But I was the least of it because amongst the 2,500 other people, there were people who had escaped from Cuba in an automobile, inner tube across shark-infested waters. There were people who had come across the Berlin Wall and been shot at. There were people for whom it was a deeply emotional experience. So it was an emotional experience for all of us. And I really started to understand what a remarkable and unique thing is the American dream. I don't think people who are born in the United States really can fathom what this American dream thing is. What it says is, we don't care about your parents. We don't even care if you have parents. If you work hard, we'll get you educated. You'll get a good job after that. You'll earn good money. You'll be able to raise a happy and healthy family. And we expect you, by the way, to pay taxes, be an American consumer, support our gross national product. And that is the American dream. They don't have a French dream or a British dream or a German dream. There's no Japanese dream. Pretty much in the UK, if your father's a plumber, well, you might grow up to be an electrician, but you're not going to be a brain surgeon, are you? It just, the stratification and the compartmentalization of society is such that you really can't aspire to go much further or further at all than your parents and your uncles and aunts. But in the United States, almost everybody goes further than their parents.
That's right. Anything can happen. Yeah,
Anything can
anything
happen in this country. And if you think of it, those who push back on immigration, it's a free resource. It's like free brains. If we let these people in, they will support our economy and make us a bigger, better, bolder country. So I was very grateful to be part of the immigration into the United States. And now I have 4 American children, and I'm a very happy and proud American.
Well, thank you for that, because it's actually inspiring to hear your story that you are proud to be an American, and it really means that you can leap, you can make leaps, right? And especially if people help you like that. I I want to go back to that one professor of yours who it reminds me of the story that George Lucas talks about, how you just have one teacher in your ear that tells you something and it can change your life. It sounds like that guy did that for you as well.
Yes,
That's what
I only knew him at that time as Mr. Lund. I didn't know his first name.
mm,
I thought maybe his first name was Mr., because he was only known as Mr. Lund. I only found out a lot later that his name was David. I think it goes far beyond just, the teacher in your life. I think every young person needs to have a mentor, someone to emulate, someone to be proud in front of. In my work with foster kids, one of the deficits in their lives is they haven't got anyone to show that they just got an A grade on a paper. They haven't got anyone. There's no parent that they can come home and say, I had a really good day in school. There's no one that they can say, today was really tough, and who will have, 3 opinions of how to make tomorrow better. I think we all need that. I've been mentored so much in my life, and it's my favorite thing that I do now. And the whole of the First Star charity, which aspires to get foster kids into college, what do? We house, educate, and encourage them on the campuses of great big universities. We have 15 academies and another 3 in the United Kingdom. So that's 18. Why are we on those campuses? Well, because what do you have on a college campus that would be really attractive to high school age foster kids? You have role models. We have the youth coaches. We hire undergrad and grad students to live in the dorms with the younger kids who come to us when they're 13 and a half or 14. And yeah, they help them with, math and English and so forth. But more than that, the younger kids who have been raised by wolves and haven't met anyone who's excellent, they look at the older kids who are going to be, astronauts or architects or dancers or engineers, and you can almost see them thinking in real time, well, why did I think all I could amount to would be someone who sweeps the floor in a fast food restaurant? If this person that I respect and admire can make something of their life, why wouldn't I do the same thing?
right. So it's not just the leg up, it's not just the training. You're saying that the role modeling is really as significant as anything else.
Yes, I think so. Kids who are raised in a bad circumstance have a glass ceiling on top of their own achievement. And I think how you bash your head through the glass ceiling is you have to see that on the other side of it, there are other people, perhaps a little older than you, and they've already done it. Things become possible when they're less scary, and they're less scary when we see a role model.
Yes, and you mentioned something to me the other day that I thought was interesting. You said that you feel that your skills that you have developed as a filmmaker, as a producer, actually help you in your charitable work. Those very skills that you've developed make you good at what you do now in your philanthropy.
Indeed, I think it's, an honor and a privilege to, whether it's working for seriously ill kids or foster kids or the unhoused, or whatever it is that I'm banging away at in my nonprofit life, to be an entrepreneur is tough. There's not a lot of thinking outside the box that happens in a nonprofit environment. Plenty of entrepreneuring, in Silicon Valley or our other great cities in commerce. We teach entrepreneurship in the MBA course. Not a whole heck of a lot of it in the area of how do we make the world a better place. So what is a film producer? A film producer is the ultimately entrepreneurial toolkit. What you're doing on several projects, but certainly one a year, if you have a career, is you're saying, is this idea big enough for me to devote a year or 18 months of my life to it? Who do I think one day I'll be able to sell it to? Who should write it? Who should direct it? Who should be in it? Where am I going to get the money from? How much money do I need? What will be the definition of the audience to whom this will appeal? And most recently, how can I use this film as well as making money to make the world a better place? If you get good at plotting out the entrepreneurial steps as a film producer on one of your projects, by the time, I've made 27 films, by the time you've made 27 films, there's kind of pattern recognition. So now what do you do in the nonprofit sphere? Well, you say, has anybody ever had this idea before? Let's do some research. No, this story has never been made. Okay. Who should write it? What are the beats of the story? Who am I going to get to direct it? What's the budget? Where should we make it? Who's in it? Who's the distribution platform? And on and on and on. But you apply them over into the nonprofit world, and you're asking yourself actually the same questions. Who's going to donate to this thing? Why will it be financially self-sustaining? How do we do it not once, but repeatedly? I'm sure Howard Schultz at one point had one coffee bar in Seattle, and then he had 4, and then he had 40, and then he had thousands all around the world. That's, second nature in for-profit business, not so much second nature in a charity. I meet people all the time and I say, this is such a wonderful idea that you've implemented here. I say, have you got any of these programs in any other city? No. I say, well, why would you not have, different branches doing the same thing? Well, because I live in Philadelphia. Okay, but there are other people who live in other cities. You could train them up. They could do one of these there, and it would be really good for the people of Cincinnati. Doesn't happen very often. The basic building blocks of being an entrepreneur for profit tend to be neither taught nor practiced in the world of charity, 501c3, nonprofit, make the world a better place. And I think there's no good reason for that. So all I've done is to take my, Sears Craftsman toolkit over from being a film producer over to the wonderful world of nonprofit. Also, how do you deal with failure as a film producer? For every one film you get made, there are probably 4 others you don't get made. That's bitterly disappointing. How do you get a film made when you've been rejected 5 times, 20 times, 10 times? And the answer is you have to rethink it. When you are raising funding for a charity, an awful lot of people say no to you, but you develop pattern recognition and you work out what nature of donor, whether it's a foundation or a high net worth person, whether it's the government, you work out where to go and get the money. And you learn by trial and error what works and what doesn't work. It's the same toolkit applied to something arguably even more important, which is, you think we might have a few problems in the world, whether it's climate change or nuclear proliferation in the hands of terrorists, or it's tribalism, it's short-sightedness, it's telling the big lie. Whatever it may be, we have some jobs of work that we better do. And who's going to fix it? Who are you going to call? It's not Ghostbusters.
No.
It's actually entrepreneurs who are able to apply new solutions to old problems. And that's what I've done. That's what I did with the Starlight Children's Foundation. It's what Steven Spielberg and I did with Starbright World. It's what I did with First Star for foster kids. It's what I've done with EDAR, EDAR, Everyone Deserves a Roof, and so on.
Yeah, fantastic organization. So, as I'm listening to you speak, you make it sound so easy, but I know that you must work really, really hard, Peter.
Yes, I think I do. I've been blessed with not needing to sleep very much. I don't know why. My dad is the same way. He's 95 now. Neither of us sleep too much. You can get more done if you only need to sleep 5 or 6 hours a night. So that's an asset. But I think also
Wow.
if you really love what you do it a lot. And I don't do things that I don't love. I work a bit 7 days a week, a lot 6 days a week. I'm always at it. I use all my electronic capabilities, such as they are, to time shift. And I'm juggling. I'm like that guy at the circus with the plates on sticks, the bamboo sticks and the plate.
Yep.
And when one gets a bit wobbly, you go pay attention to that one. And then you add another stick, you put another plate on it. So I'm always exploring the outer perimeter. I think the old adage, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. I think it's true. And no disrespect to people who just get overwhelmed in 40 hours in a week. I don't. So that's a privilege. And applying time, effort, bit of expertise. It's a team sport. I'm a team leader. I believe in what we call servant leadership. I think the job of a chairman or a leader is to lead and to enable other people to help a lot. And most tasks fall more rapidly, better, bigger, bolder when many hands are applied to make light work. So I'm privileged that I start by thinking, is this film or is this idea for a charity, is it big enough? Is this going to be appealing? When we've made it, how will it be sold? Why is it any good? Who will be thrilled by this? Who will experience empathy and feel a compassionate need to help this nonprofit? And of course, the other skill you develop as a film producer that's incredibly helpful anywhere in business and anywhere in nonprofit is the ability to pitch it. You have to be able to do the elevator pitch, and it can't be endless. You have to be able to thrill someone. In the case of a film, you're telling them the story of the film. You haven't made the film yet. You're sitting with an actor's agent and explaining to them why their client wants to be in it. You're explaining to a director how wonderful this can be. You're getting a distributor to fork out money because you're inspiring them to believe in a story that hasn't been told yet. Mostly people won't sit down and read a 110-page script on the front. You've got to get them enticed first. Over on the charity side, you have to be able to say why it's important and why it will lift people up. And what I've learned is you're making it up. It's blue sky when you start, but then you develop pattern recognition on what are the incredibly emotive stories of your experiences in the nonprofit. Not very difficult when children are the clients of the nonprofit.
Right. Can you tell me one of those stories? Because you shared one or two, but will you take the time now to tell me something that happened to you that moved you that you know?
Well, I know when things move me because I have to leave the room and go for a little walk to recover my composure. So picture in your mind this. The setting is UCLA, where we have a thriving academy for abused and neglected kids in the First Star Academy there. We have two cohorts, that's two classes, that's 60 kids in total. So there we are in a big auditorium, and the grown-ups are sitting in the seats, and down on the stage, one foster kid, one scholar, we call them, at a time, is coming up, and some are singing a song, some are doing a poem that they've written, others are doing spoken word, three of them are coming down and dancing, and it's pretty splendid. And then this 14-year-old student, scholar, comes down, and up comes the playback music, and she is so frightened. This is nothing like the rehearsal. She is so frightened seeing 250 strangers sitting there in the seats in front of her. She can't get the first note out, and it's shocking. And now the music has left her behind, and now the music stops, and this is truly dreadful. And I'm thinking, okay, we have to rescue her. And then I see Karina, the director of the academy, out of the corner of my eye. She is going to go down and usher her off. And we're all sort of horrified and feeling how ashamed the student is. This is a bad thing. We've made her life worse for one moment than it would have been if she hadn't even gone down there and tried to sing. And then the most beautiful thing happens. In her cohort is another 14-and-a-half-year-old, the size of a linebacker, big, strong young man. And the next thing you know, he's lumbered down there onto the stage, and he has planted himself with his back to the audience, blocking the view of the girl, his fellow student. And there's a bit of whispering. And the next thing you know, there are two more students who have gone down, and now the four of them are whispering. And then there's 7, and then there's 12, and then there's 15, and now there's 25, and now there's all 30 in that cohort. And there's kind of like a scrum down there, whisper, whisper, whisper. And after a bit more whispering, one of the kids on the outside of the scrum does an upward hand motion, turn on the music. And sure enough, the person on playback turns on the music. And out of the middle of this little group of humanity comes a plaintive little voice singing the song. And the more she sings, the less plaintive it is, the stronger. And by the end of the song, she sounds like Beyonce down there. And at the end of it, the audience was so moved, the kids came down off the stage with their arms around each other. The audience stood up and applauded. I wasn't the only one who cried, but I was one of the ones who cried. And I thought, this is what we do in First Star. All children have a right to a family, have a right to belong, have a right to unconditional love. But unfortunately, when there is abuse or neglect, we remove them from their families and we put them into care with strangers, whether it's institutional care or it's an individual family, and then we move them around an awful lot. We have kids who've been moved around a dozen times, 15 times, some of them 20 times. There's an absence of love, not in all cases, but in most. And when there is an absence of unconditional love, how can you amount to anything? The glass ceiling is actually pressing down on your head. But it's like watching flowers grow in First Star. A month in to that first summer session, and these kids love each other. They are supporting each other. They are palling around. They are standing up for each other. And siblings are where you find them. And not only that, but uncles and aunts are where you can find them. And if they are positive role models, that's what you put in, and that's what you'll get out. And if they are negative role models, gang leaders and pimps and hoods and hoodlums and criminals and people who aspire to nothing, well, that's what you get out mostly. It's a rare human who can go past their upbringing and create a life of virtue and achievement. And what we do in First Star for that girl who, by the way, has thrived ever since. And not only is a fantastic singer, but is now in college. What we do is we say, family is where you find it. Welcome to First Star. This is going to be your family. And a month in, it really is like watching flowers grow, because these kids I think they get taller in a First Star Academy. And certainly they stand more upright. And suddenly they're looking around the university campus and they're saying, I'm really interested in nanotechnology. And we had a class where we looked through an electron microscope. It's absolutely amazing. I think maybe I want to be a scientist.
Mm.
It's in the humans. You've got to apply not just, obviously, we have to teach the academics. If you don't have an SAT or an ACT score, you probably won't go to college. But it goes beyond that. You have to teach life skills. These are kids who need to be helped to brush their teeth properly when they first come in. And then they need all sorts of life skills, financial literacy, stuff that in an intact unitary family, the kids would get from their mum and dad, or a parent at least. But if these are kids with negative role models, negative parents, or none at all, well, you have to, as well as the academics and the life skills, you have to create the atmosphere of unconditional love. It's amazing how, the kids, especially and including the kids who had terrible grades, we don't even recruit looking at their grades, because if you've been in 15 schools, how would you have any grades? It's a miracle you can write your name on the corner of the paper.
Yeah, absolutely.
But suddenly, these are kids who are proud to show their paper because they got an A- and they never had anything better than a C+ before. You have to have someone to boast to a little bit. You have to have people who care about you and who care about you. And that way you can care about yourself.
And how do you feel? How do you feel about what you're doing, about what your organization is doing? How does it make you feel, Peter?
Well, I feel privileged. I've always thought that I get more out of it than I put in. I met with Ted Turner years ago, and he has a sign on his desk that says, lead, follow, or get out of the way. I think it may have been Roosevelt who said that in the first place, but his sign on his desk says, lead, follow, or get out of the way. And I think the privilege, the pleasure is in watching this idea. Bluntly, in Starlight, we didn't know what we were doing in 1982. My cousin met this 11-year-old little boy in London who was dying of a brain tumor. And she said, what would make you happy? And little Sean said, I want to go to Disneyland. And she phoned me because I was already living here. And she said, I've done this terrible thing. I've made this promise to this dying child. What do we do? And I said, well, we better fly him to LA. So we flew him and his mom to LA. Really, another advantage of being a film producer, you're always doing something you've never done before. So we just sort of thought it through. What would make him happy? What would make his mom happy? What do we do after the Disney experience? And should he go to the beach? And what about if he went up in a helicopter and all that kind of thing? And after he went home to London and he passed away, it was the most strange moment for all of us who had met him, because everybody knew he was going to die, but we felt that we couldn't give him any more quantity of life, but we had given him a bit of quality and also some things that had never dawned on us, like this was a huge gift to his mom, who got to remember him at Disneyland, let's say, instead of only remembering his last period of time in a hospital bed, not looking too good. So I stood at the end of the boardroom table after work one day at the company that I was running, and I had asked 15 or 20 people who I thought might be interested in replicating this. And I told the story. I remember we had Polaroid pictures of Sean's trip, and we passed them around as well. And everybody said, yeah, maybe we could do this another few times a year. I thought we would grant 3 wishes a year, 5 wishes a year in a good year. We raised a little bit of money. We said, well, where are the sick kids? They must be in hospitals. So we went and met with some hospitals, and they said, we would love it if you would meet with the kids. We had to develop a protocol to ask them what would make them happy. And then we just did it. So Starlight, which is now not just across the United States, but also in Canada, the UK, and Australia, Starlight has, in all of those years, and with a lot of teamwork, we've raised and spent on seriously ill children a little over $1 billion. That's $1,000 million. Good job that we didn't know that that was the goal at the beginning. We just put one foot in front of the other. But again, it's the power of a really good idea. You say to people, we make kids happy. That's what our mission statement says on starlight.org. We're here. Our mission is to bring happiness to seriously ill children. It's so simple. It's so elegant. Who would not want to support that? So an enormous amount of money raised. And, one thing begets the next thing. So when we started Starlight in that very first meeting, the lawyer said, so I should probably incorporate it and get a 501c3. And we all said, yeah, please do that. Volunteer lawyer. And he said, what do you want to call it? And I said, that's a really good question. I don't know what to call it. And there was a young woman there, very pretty, as I remember. And this was our second date because I knew that we would need an accountant. And I'd had one date. This was back in my single days. And I'd had one date with this lady who was an accountant. And so I'd invited her to, not very nice thing to do, I'd invited her to volunteer in this second meeting, having a charity meeting. Do you want to come? And it was she, when the lawyer said, what do you want to call it? She said, you know that children's rhyme, Starlight, Starbright, first star I see tonight? She said, why don't we call it the Starlight Children's Foundation? And we all nodded. And I remember there was another lady there who said, I do logos as a hobby. And we discussed a bit what might be the logo. We decided it was a child reaching for a star. That was the original branding. And,
See, this is why you're good at what you do, Peter, because you got all the elements together seemingly randomly, but actually not at all. It has to do with your intuition, your prowess, your acumen, your vision.
Well, you're kind. Don't ask me about the ones that didn't work, because there are
No, we don't need to know about those. I don't want to role model those. I just want to know about the stuff that works.
Absolutely. Well,
talk to me about Foster Boy, because this is how I met you on the panel of the very, very powerful film.
Call me stupid. I had never.
Nobody could call you stupid, Peter, ever.
I'd never worked in media on a project where we had a strong pro-social double bottom line. In other words, I had never made a film which was designed to be commercial, with actors in it, and we'll get a distributor and people will pay money to go and see it, but which was also intended to make the world a better place. Had never happened to me in the same room. I'd either been in a room with people and we were making a film or developing a film or whatever it might be, television thing, or I'd been in an unrelated room doing charity work. Invent it, raise the money for it, make it thrive, do the business plan, run the thing, move on to the next one. So my entrepreneurship had never been united in making a film for social change that was also commercial. So I was teaching a class at the University of California, Riverside, which is, by the way, a long way from where I live.
Very long drive. No matter where you live, it's a long drive.
It's a long drive to Riverside, unless, of course, you live in Riverside, which I didn't. Anyway, there I was lecturing in screenwriting to the MFA class. So the students were all getting their masters in fine arts in screenwriting. And there I was lecturing away. They gave me 2 hours, which I used. And I looked down at the students, and most of them, as you would imagine for a master's level course, they were mostly in their mid to late 20s, except this one man who was sitting in the middle, as I remember. And he looked to be in his mid to late 50s. And I thought, oh, it's the token mature student. So sure enough, he comes up to me and sticks his hand out after the class. You can tell whether you were any good lecturing because there's a sort of conga line that forms of people who want to have a few words. But he's the one who said, can I buy you a coffee? And I fancied a coffee. And he said, there's a Starbucks over there. And that's where we went, he and I. And he told me his story. I had mentioned foster care. And he said, you know, I'm an incredibly successful litigator. I have a thriving firm. I've done so well for myself as a litigator for corporations. But what I do for love, because I care about them, is I represent foster kids. And I said, well, Jay, that's wonderful. Why did you start doing that? How did that happen? And he said, well, it's kind of a weird, funny story. I was coming out of a courthouse. There was this judge who knew me. And he said, Deratani, I never see you doing the pro bono. Why is that? And I said, well, you know, Judge, I'm very busy and I fly around a lot taking depositions. But don't worry, I give so much money to charity. And the judge said, no, unacceptable. This is not a voluntary thing for you to do. This is an obligation you owe the Illinois bar. Come with me. And he grabs him by the sleeve and he marches him down the corridor. And there is a young man chained to a bench by the ankle. And the judge says to the young man, this is Mr. Deratani. He's one of the best few lawyers in Chicago. And today's your lucky day because he is going to represent you. And Jay is saying, no, Judge, seriously, I have to go to the airport. I can't do this. And the judge says, Mr. Deratani, this young man has nobody. But that's okay, because today he has you. Have a nice day. And the judge goes away, and Jay has now been ordered by a judge to represent this young man, which he did. And he told me this extraordinary story of how the young man had been abused repeatedly by an older predator on a farm that was run as a group foster home. And the for-profit foster care agency that placed both kids there, they never told the people running the placement that they had a sexual predator on their hands. I mean, really disgusting. And they actually shredded the file in order to get the older kid in. Why? Well, because the incentives in for-profit foster care agencies are how many kids can you squeeze in there? How many times can you move them? Every time you make a placement, you get another fee, and from the fee comes another bonus. So,
and it's big money, very big money, right?
Yeah, one of them does $2 billion a year. Think of that. So one of them's on the New York Stock Exchange. So I said, you know, there's a film here. And Jay, to his credit, said, yeah, I was thinking of that. And I said, yeah, but, you know, it's even better because you're training, God knows why, you're such a successful litigator. I have no clue why you wanted to be in the film industry as a writer, for God's sake. Talk about a challenging job. For you, a second job. I said, you should write this. And I got back in the car and drove endlessly back home. And I forgot all about it. 3 months later, I open an email and J. Paul Deratani has written the script. And now usually when a civilian writes a script, you think, oh God, there goes my Sunday afternoon. Now I've got to read this thing, everything given to you by a non-pro writer. It's so unlikely that it will be any good that you feel it's a chore rather than a privilege. Anyway, I read this thing actually on a Sunday afternoon, and it was so damn good, I read it a second time. And on the Monday morning, I phoned Jay and I said, Jay, You write a hell of a script. This is absolutely wonderful. Furthermore, I think it's commercial. Furthermore, it speaks to me, the subject matter, and I think we should make it. He said, well, actually, one other thing. I've raised quite a lot of money, I think. And I said, oh, yeah, how much have you raised? He said, oh, $3.5 million, thereabouts. And I said, how on earth did you do that? And he said, well, there are these people who know me. And when I told them I wrote a script, they said, well, we might like to be executive producers. And could we come to the premiere? And, would there be a red carpet and all that good stuff? And he had raised 3.5. I said, I think that this would only cost a little bit more than that, maybe 4.25, plus or minus. I said, I think I can raise the missing bit, which I did. So we then went out to cast it, and the cast said, I'm in. I care about the issue. And how can this be in our country that foster care is run for profit in 28 of our 50 states? It's disgusting, said Matthew Modine. It's disgusting, said Lou Gossett Jr. It's disgusting, said Amy Brenneman. And so we cast it. We made the film. We got distribution. Would have been a really good idea not to go into release during the COVID. No sooner did we have some theatrical exhibition going on, but the COVID closed everything down. But that turned out to be weirdly a blessing, because the film opened in September of last year, and we're on 25 different view-on-demand platforms. Pay $5.99 on Amazon Prime or Fandango or iTunes and see Foster Boy. But that's only the beginning of the story, because as we were making the film, if you're any good as a producer, your most challenging work is in pre-production. Once the film starts shooting, if you've hired the right people, it doesn't make itself, and you need to keep an eye on it, but your workload goes down. So there I sat in my director's chair on the set thinking, how do we use this film as the spark plug to do down foster care run for profit? Wouldn't that be a goal?
Yeah.
So cut to the chase. If you can go to the film site, fosterboy.com, and there you can see the film and the actors and what the story's about, and the 17 film festivals where we've won awards, and you can see all 25 of the view-on-demand platforms with click-throughs, where to get the film, and so forth. But if you go to a different website, which is called fixfostercare.org, there you'll see a little bit about the film, but mainly what you'll see is a petition. And the petition is to ask President Biden and Congress to stop, through Title 4E, the transfer of federal money after a transition going to for-profit companies, some of them enormously big, and to transition to either non-profit foster care or foster care run by local government itself. We think there's a pretty good precedent, because President Biden earlier this year announced that he's going to transition away from federal prisons run for profit. So the ethical logic would be, if it is ethically unacceptable to make a buck on the heads of convicted felons, why would anybody think that it's okay to make a buck on the heads of abused and neglected children who did nothing wrong ever?
And it is absolutely not. So it's fixfostercare.org.
Yes.
Go and sign the petition.
Go sign the petition. You will be joining, I'm happy to say, a little stunningly in a good way. We have, when I looked over the weekend, most recently, we have 334,000 people who have taken 2 minutes out of their life to sign the petition. We want to try to get it up to 433,000, because that's how many American kids live in foster care, plus or minus. And then we're going to go to Washington. We're going to meet in the White House. We're going to hand over the petition. The principal research on this was done on a bipartisan basis. By who? By the Senate Finance Committee and by BuzzFeed. And it's all footnoted right there on fixfostercare.org. So I don't know whether we're going to pull it off.
I think oh no, I know you will.
Well, I think we have a really good shot, and that will be an example of what you can do that's not just making a buck with a motion picture or a television project. It's how do we move the needle in society? And that is what all the films I'm producing. I'm part of a new company, again, teamwork, but philmcomedia.com, philmcomedia.com, philmcomedia.com. If you have a look there, all the film and television projects that we are getting made and doing really well with are all double bottom line. We aspire to make money, pay the investors back, sell tickets, get lots of people to tune in on Netflix, whatever is the platform of distribution. But in addition, every film or television project has a social agenda. We have goals that we are pursuing where we won't make any money, where we are partnered with between 7 and 100 nonprofits, and where we're doing everything every which way to move the needle socially, whether it's facing towards climate change, nuclear proliferation, tribalism, nativism, helping children get an education, whatever may be the issue, and God knows we've got a lot.
All right, tell me about, you also said to me that the meaning of life is service. Tell me what that means to you.
I'm glad you asked that. Every so often I get a phone call now that we're back to having business breakfasts and business lunches and dinners and so forth. Every so often I get a call from someone who says something when we get, I think they're going to want to meet because they're, let's say, an agent with one of the big 3 agencies, that kind of thing. Sometimes it's a business person, but, you know, I work in media, so it's mostly people who know me through media. And they sit there at breakfast and they say, I am making nearly $500,000 a year with my bonus. My life is shit. I don't think what I do counts for anything. All I'm doing is helping miserable so-and-so clients to get miserable so-and-so projects made. And I don't want this to be my legacy. I don't want my kids to think my dad made lots of money so we could have a big house from reality television. I would actually like to do something worthwhile. You seem so happy. Why is that? And I say, well, it's not from making films. It's from helping people to have better lives. You want to know about homelessness? Let me tell you about EDAR. And by the end of the breakfast, my goal is to get them to volunteer using their skill set in something either that they care about. I mean, it's at the point now where we have so many volunteers in my nonprofits that I encourage them to ask themselves, what do you care about? What would be in 2 years' time if you were able to say, I put a real dent in a human challenge? What would that one be? Because let me help you a bit. You're entrepreneurial. You're a business person. You can spin a tale. You pitch well. Let me help you find your calling. Don't give up your day job. Keep it. You know, make the $500,000 a year. But let me help you with what you can do under your blotter, which will be very appealing to other people. Or if you want, come and be part of one of my nonprofits. We got room. You want to be on the board? Come on in. Let's make, let's distribute more EDARs to homeless folk through your help. We've invented the thing. We got the patents on it. We're giving them away to unhoused people, you know, old ladies sleeping in cardboard boxes and all that kind of thing, children down on Skid Row, runaways and so forth. Come and help with that one.
I'm going to put this all in the show notes, Peter, so that people can look up everything that you've been doing. I think it's just so important. It's also very moving. I'm kind of wowed by you. I want to ask you a question that I ask all of my guests, and that is, what is the one thing that no one would know about you unless you told them?
Wow, such an interesting question. Hats off to you for asking it. I think it was an act of will for me. Around the time that I went to college and the few years after that, I was a studious introvert, a SWAT. I was really intellectually strong. And I decided, partly when I went to Cambridge, to reinvent myself. And then when I went to America, I reinvented myself. And I decided to reinvent myself as an extrovert. And you can't do what I do unless you have the gift of the gab. I did not always have it. I had to force myself to extrovert my presentation skills and to dare to do. And that has served me really well ever since. But it was not intuitive in the first place. The epiphany that led to EDAR was that I came out of a restaurant in Beverly Hills on Beverly Drive, and I was accosted, as often happens there, by an unhoused man, and I was intimidated by him. I thought he was in my space. He had his hand out, sort of poking me in the chest, and I gave him money, and I went off to the parking lot, and I got in my car, and I realized I was shaking because I was so ashamed that I had allowed myself to be intimidated by a guy who didn't have two nickels to rub together, and it was not acceptable. And one of the things that has worked really well for me, and I've taught my 4 kids to do it, I've taught hundreds of foster kids to do it, is dare to do. You'll never get outside the envelope of your experience if you don't poke at the edges. What's the worst that can happen? If you're in an envelope and you're poking with a pencil, the worst that can happen is you might go through the edge of the envelope and say, whoops, I guess I found the edge. I will never be a concert pianist. And you come back in and you poke in a different direction. So for me, with homeless folk, unhoused folk, I thought I need to get past my fear of, big smelly men who want me to give them money. I'll do interviews. And I went out several weekends in a row with a clipboard and I asked 2 sets of questions. I would just go up to a homeless person and say, do you mind if I ask you some questions? 2 principal questions were, how'd you get money? And where do you sleep at night? And the epiphany, and I believe life has epiphanies, a moment of truth, a moment that pivots you in a new direction. I asked a lady, an old lady, she's probably only 40 because, average life expectancy on the street is only in the mid-40s, but she looked really old. And I said, my dear, where do you sleep at night? And she said, come with me, I'll show you. And she led me by the sleeve onto the Caltrans land next to the 405 San Diego freeway. And she said, here is where I sleep. And in front of us was a large cardboard box. It was shitty and it smelled bad. And it had a piece of blue tarp or blue plastic over the top of it. And that was my epiphany, because on the side of the box, it said Sub-Zero. And I thought, I'll be damned. This soul sleeps every night in the box that my Sub-Zero refrigerator or one like it came in. I got the refrigerator and she got the box. What is wrong with this picture? A whole hell of a lot. And we need to make the world a better and more inclusive place. We need to push back on hatred. Hatred is only fear dressed up to feel a little happier. No one wants to say, I'm scared stiff of those people who don't look like me. It's much easier to say, I hate them. Everything's their fault. These immigrants, they should go back where they came from. We need to remember the American dream. We need to remember how America was built, the good stuff, not the bad stuff. And we need to use our media skills to spin a different narrative, which happens to be substantially true, substantially scientific, and which is a counter narrative. But we tend not to do that. And I think we need to get our act together, pushing back on the nativist lies. And we need to do it inclusively. And that is what I'm going to do before I hang it up. So I'm paying attention to philmcomedia.com. I'm paying attention to edar.org, to firststar.org, and to Starlight, my original nonprofit, which is starlight.org. And that's me. And, the kids have left home and gone on to productive lives. I'm privileged to do what I do because of the people that I meet. I mean, what a joy to watch the results. As I said, it's like watching flowers grow in these nonprofits. And, the fact that we took a little scaredy cat, 13-and-a-half-year-old, 10 years ago, who is now an urban planner, having gone all the way through First Star and all the way through San Francisco State, and now has skills and a job and is making the world a better place. What could possibly be better than that?
Wow.
It's an honor.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Here I am. Let's do some great stuff. If you work in the field of joy for others, you will only ever have joy yourself. And at least if you have a challenge, you'll have other people next to you pushing the boulder up the hill. And that's a joy as well.
Thank you. I'm so inspired by Peter Samuelson. The fact that he works so hard and finds so much joy in life, and he gets so much joy from the people with whom he works. And I'm just awed by the fact that he's constantly growing and changing and inventing in order to make the world a better place for others. And that is just fantastic. If you see something, say something. If you suspect that a child's health or safety is jeopardized in any way by parents or anyone else, contact the Child Protective Services Agency in your county. 24-hour hotlines are staffed by trained social workers who will help you through the process, and you can do so anonymously. In California, you can call the Child Protection Hotline at 800-540-4000. So if you see something, say something. You might be saving a child's life. I want to thank the supremely talented Christina Apostolopoulos for her beautiful music, Eferisto. To hear more of her music, go to Spotify and Instagram at Christina Aposto. That's ChristianaAposto. I know you want to. Her stuff is really great. And thanks to my audio producer extraordinaire, Marcos Campito. I'm glad I found you. Thanks for listening, and if you like what you hear, please rate us and hit subscribe.